Hello everyone, have a wonderful day. Today I'll continue the story of Tu Diem and Toan. On the crucial night before giving birth, Diem is rushed to the emergency room, showing signs of premature labor. But the biggest shock comes when her doctor turns out to be her husband's ex-girlfriend. Past and present clash as the life of an unborn child is threatened. Will she choose revenge or save a life? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next episodes. The ambulance siren ripped through the stormy night as Diem screamed in agony, her hands clinging to the bed frame as if desperately trying to hold on to life. Toan ran after the stretcher, his face pale, his breath ragged. The emergency room door slammed shut. Toan stood frozen, his legs heavy, his eyes fixed on the glaring red sign. The endless hospital corridor stretched on, the cold fluorescent lights illuminating the empty chairs, making everything seem lifeless. A nurse emerged and briefly announced that Diem's condition was critical and required close monitoring before delivery. There was no further reassurance. Toan nodded mechanically, his throat dry, unable to utter a word. He sat down, hunched over, his hands covering his head, as if letting go would cause everything to collapse. Old memories, secrets he had kept hidden, suddenly flooded his mind, mingling with the fear of losing the woman behind that door. Toan had never believed in fate, but at this moment, he began to fear that some consequences were unavoidable. In that suffocating atmosphere, he was completely unaware that behind the delivery room door, another fateful encounter was about to unfold. A female doctor emerged from the on-call room, her sharp, decisive voice echoing in the silent hallway. She wore a white shirt, her posture upright, her eyes cold yet sharp, the gaze of someone all too familiar with life and death. Toan instinctively looked up, and in that instant his whole body stiffened. Their eyes met, and the past flooded back into Toan's mind. On her chest, a brightly shining name tag bore the name he had tried to forget for years. The woman stood still, her eyes momentarily wavering before quickly regaining their professional composure. No greeting, no explanation, only a heavy silence between two people who had once shared a deep connection. The doctor turned, ordering special monitoring for pregnant Diem, her voice calm to the point of coldness. Toan stood frozen, his heart pounding as if it would burst. He understood immediately that tonight was not just a life or death battle between Diem and her child. It was also the night when secrets he thought he had buried forever began to surface, right where he could not escape. The steady beeping of monitoring machines slowly pulled Diem back into consciousness, each rhythmic sound echoing through the cold white room as she opened her eyes. The hospital ceiling appeared blurred, fluorescent light shining down and making her head spin. A heavy sensation spread through her body, especially her abdomen, where the contractions had eased but not completely disappeared. Diem tried to move, only to realize her arm was secured by a clear IV line, medication dripping steadily into her veins. Thin wires extended from her belly to machines beside the bed, screens displaying the baby's heartbeat in calm, blinking patterns. A nurse approached gently, reassuring her that all vital signs were under control and that she needed to remain absolutely still. Diem nodded faintly, her breathing still strained. In that moment, she felt both relief and confusion, as if suspended on a fragile line between safety and danger. She turned her head, searching for Toan, but found only quiet space and the persistent sound of machines. The steady rhythm reminded her that from this point forward, everything depended on the decisions being made around her, decisions that would determine whether she and her unborn child could safely reach the days ahead. Diem accidentally heard Toan's voice echoing from the hallway, softly calling a name she had never heard him mention before. Her heart tightened, each beat growing heavier and more uneven. Through the slightly open door, Diem saw Toan standing across from the female doctor, his expression strained beyond concealment. Their exchange was brief, yet their shared glances carried unspoken weight. The doctor maintained proper distance, but familiarity lingered in their smallest gestures. When Toan turned back, panic flashed in his eyes, as if afraid of being seen. Diem quickly closed her eyes, pretending to sleep, though her mind was fully awake. Disconnected fragments began assembling into a suspicion that sent chills down her spine. Why was Toan so tense? And why did this doctor unsettle him so deeply? Lying motionless in the quiet hospital room, Diem felt an inner storm brewing. She realized that some truths need not be spoken aloud to shatter the sense of safety she once trusted without question. The truth began to surface when the female doctor returned to the room alone, gently closing the door behind her. Her professional tone faded as she looked at Diem with eyes heavy from long suppressed emotion. After a suffocating silence, she admitted she once shared a deep relationship with Toan in the past. Diem felt as though the ground beneath her had collapsed. The doctor offered no details, only stating that the relationship ended with unresolved pain and loss. She assured Diem that she would fulfill her duty as a physician regardless of history, yet every word cut deeper than any accusation could. When Diem asked about the child from that time, her voice trembling, the doctor remained silent, eyes reddening as she turned away. The answer needed no words. In that moment, Diem realized her husband's past was not merely a forgotten chapter. It stood before her, vivid and merciless, embodied by the very woman holding her life and her child's fate in her hands. Toan entered the room and met Diem's unwavering gaze, free of avoidance. There were no accusations, no tears, only silence that terrified him more than anger ever could. He knew she understood. Toan sat beside the bed, trembling hands reaching for his wife's, but Diem gently pulled away. In that moment, the distance between them felt greater than ever. He tried to explain, yet words caught in his throat. Diem turned her face aside, silent tears soaking the pillow. The air grew so heavy that even breathing felt difficult. Toan realized he was not only facing the fear of losing his wife and child, but also the consequences of choices he had long avoided. In that silence, both knew that unspoken truths do not disappear. They wait for the weakest moment to erupt. And the true storm, both physical and emotional, was still ahead, ready to engulf everything. Tension escalated as the monitor suddenly flickered, forcing the medical team to act immediately. The female doctor stood beside Diem's bed, her sharp gaze diagnosing the serious risk of premature labor. Without hesitation, she ordered emergency measures to save the fetus, fully aware of the risks to both mother and child. He gripped his wife's hand tightly, his heart pounding with each resolute instruction. No one in the room knew that behind her calm, professional exterior lurked a storm of emotions. The doctor understood that even the slightest mistake could cause history to repeat itself. She silently vowed that this time she would not let another life be lost. Medications were injected, equipment adjusted. Each minute seemed to stretch for hours. Diem closed her eyes, trying to maintain a steady breathing rhythm as instructed. In that fragile moment, resentment, past wounds, and an unfinished story were all cast aside. Only one goal remained: to keep the child in the womb long enough to be born normally, without reliving the tragedy that had taken so much from them years earlier. The night stretched endlessly as Diem was moved to a specialized monitoring room, every movement strictly controlled. The female doctor remained at her post, personally tracking every reading and subtle change in Diem's condition. Outside, Toan sat motionless, hands tightly clasped, fear and guilt pressing heavily on every breath. At times, he glimpsed the doctor through the glass, her face exhausted yet unwavering. There were no accusations, no resentful glances, only relentless focus. Toan realized that the woman he once hurt deeply was now holding his family's life together. Inside the room, Diem grew more alert, feeling each contraction being suppressed, each medication flowing through her body. The doctor reassured her calmly, explaining that if they survived the night, the baby would have a strong chance to reach full term. Diem nodded faintly, tears spilling over. For the first time, she no longer saw the woman as a rival, but as someone standing beside her, fighting for the life of a child not yet born. When Diem's condition stabilized, the female doctor stepped into the hallway where Toan waited, hollow-eyed. Without avoidance, she told him she had done everything not for him, but for the child. Toan lowered his head, offering no excuses, no pleas. He understood this was the price of his past choices. The doctor continued, stating that their past would not be repeated by allowing another life to suffer the consequences. She had lost a child because of Toan's cowardice, and she would not let that tragedy happen again, even for someone else's child. Her words carried no hatred, only raw truth. Toan broke down, fully confronting the weight of his past for the first time. Back in the room, Diem heard everything. She did not interrupt or accuse. In that moment, she understood that redemption did not come from erasing the past, but from preventing it from causing further harm. The baby's heartbeat remained steady inside her, each rhythm a quiet declaration that this time, life had been preserved. The story softened in the days that followed, as Diem remained hospitalized for long-term monitoring. The pregnancy gradually stabilized, each passing week a quiet victory. The female doctor completed the preservation protocol, handed over the case, and chose to step away once safety was assured. Before leaving the hospital, she met Diem one last time. No apologies, no resentment, only a subtle nod as two women who understood the value of life beyond anything else. Toan stood at a distance, not approaching. He knew some people enter our lives to correct a mistake, then leave without needing to be remembered. Diem rested her hand on her belly, feeling the gentle movement inside, her gaze stronger than ever. This child would be born at the right time, free from the tragedies of adults. And sometimes, an ending needs no cries or tears. It only requires that life be preserved, and that those involved learn not to repeat old mistakes. That alone can be miracle enough.